the stream. I started off with a technical analysis trading background, and then kind of just moved into long-term investing because the ROI is better, lower risk, higher ROI. But with that being said, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like there's still some lessons, some good, useful things I've learned from kind of my TA trading side of things. And one of the most important things I've learned that I think can be somewhat easily communicated, I guess we're going to find out, that's useful to the most amount of people is understanding the market cycle. And so cryptocurrency moves in a cyclical fashion because of the Bitcoin halvings. And, even though there's arguments that Bitcoin's influence on the rest of the market will continue to diminish over time, I make the argument that it's likely to be a gradual process, which therefore is why it's still important to follow Bitcoin, understand Bitcoin, because even though it may have a diminishing effect, it's not going to be gradual. And so what I have found is that, how do you know when to take profits? People talk about laddering in, people talk about laddering out. But in my opinion, there is a way to understand overbought regions, oversold regions. I'm not making the case that one ought to or one can consistently time the market perfectly. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that it is not impossible to understand some semblance of some kind of oversold period and some kind of overbought period. And so one of the things that have been most useful in my understanding to kind of try and understand when there has been an inflection point, when the market, a bull market, fundamentally flips from a bull market to a bear market. And I think part of this reasoning is how Richard times his top calls.
Called the top on the day.
Yeah, he did it twice, and he does a version of what I'm bringing up here, which is, and maybe I could share my screen. I don't have to share my screen, but it works uncanny with.
Share it, man. I'll throw it up.
Sure, yeah. If I just have this pulled up, share my screen. Yeah, let me know if you guys can see this. So right here, we're looking at 2017 Bitcoin and 2018 Bitcoin. And so what I've found that is extremely useful and perhaps the single most important piece of simple, potentially easy to communicate TA that everyone can use and take into account is kind of trying to understand when a bull market might end, or at the very least understanding when there's an inflection point where once you pass a certain point, while it's theoretically possible that a bull run might continue, you are continuing to operate in the market where there is now a much higher degree of risk. And I'll go on to explain what I mean, which is whenever you're in a bull market and you're trying to understand when the bull market will end, what I like to do is I find a moving average, some kind of support level. It can be a band, it can be a cloud, it can be an EMA, it can be an SMA. There's many, many kind of ways to find support. What I have found works extremely well, specifically for Bitcoin and Hex, is the 50-day simple moving average, this white line here. And what I like to do is find a support level, moving average, that holds as support at least once throughout the bull market. And then once we break that support level and get several daily closes below it, it marks the end of the bull market. Or at the very least, what it marks is that if you continue in the market, you're continuing to operate in that market with now a much, much higher degree of risk that the bull market is weakening and ending. So we can see here in 2017, we pumped, we dumped, we found support. We pumped again, found support. As soon as we broke below it, and this is a 3-day, and we had a 3-day candle close below it, it was the end. And so, again, it's not a perfect rule because, again, we broke above it and we made a slightly higher high. But the point is that this signified an inflection point where the fundamental nature of the market shifted, where from this point onward, it was fundamentally far riskier to be a participant, to be a bull in this market. That is this cycle. Let's take a look at 2017 as well. We're pumping, we crash, find support during our parabola, during our bull run here. And so we're pumping, come back down, find support. As soon as we broke below it and it had 3-day candles, specifically 3-day candles closing below it, it marked the end of the bull run. So this is now 2 cycles where once we break below the 50-day SMA, have 3 days closing below it during a parabola, breaking below this has marked the end of the bull market twice. And this doesn't just work for Bitcoin, it works uncannily well for Hex as well. Look at this. We're pumping, crash, find support on it. Pumping, crash, find support on it. Pumping, crash. As soon as we got a 3-day candle opening and closing below it, what did we have? Nothing but death, nothing but crashing and burning. And so moving forward, if we have a parabolic period where we pump, dump, find support on it, and then continue to go up again, once we have several daily candles closing once below it, it doesn't necessarily 100% guaranteed mark the end of the bull run. But what it does do is it is a marker, a flag that marks a point in which participating as a bull further in the market, the risk has greatly increased. So, like again, in this case with Bitcoin, we broke below and eventually made a higher high. So it wasn't a guarantee that the bear market was here, but we could see that it was pretty much a bear market. We didn't go on to sustain new all-time highs. The risk was far greater participating in this market. Same thing with Hex. Look at support, 3-day below, death, burning. And you can do this not just with the 50-day SMA. You can do this with some band, whatever it might be. But the point is, this kind of strategy helps you understand, at the very least, when it becomes far riskier to continue to be a participant in the market. Find some kind of support band, moving average, cloud, whatever it might be, that held that support at least once during the parabola. And then once it breaks below it and gets several daily candles closing below it, that's your marker that, hey, it's probably time to get out of the market. It's exactly what happened this cycle with Hex, and it's now happened twice with 2 cycles with Bitcoin. We're breaking the 50-day SMA, has marked the end. And again, maybe next cycle it's the 55, maybe next cycle it's some other moving average. But the point is, find some kind of support level that holds the support. Once we break below it, it's several daily candles closing below it, it's kind of the end, man. It's time to get out. And so I believe that this is a very simple piece of TA that could be extremely helpful moving forward, because this kind of TA, all it does is just it shows you a marker of when it becomes a lot more risky to be a bull in the market.
So that's going from bull to bear. What about going from bear to bull? Like, what kind of do we have anything to kind of look up on that for current data, or is it something we look at for past data?
So for me, this kind of TA is particularly useful during a parabolic period. When kind of thinking about what makes sense in a period of correction in a bear market, I don't look so much at moving averages, because moving averages can be they can be less useful. For me, what I like to do is use timing analysis personally, because the fault I find very often with TA and using different indicators is that it can be rather arbitrary. And so to kind of avoid falling into arbitrary traps when in periods of uncertainty, I like to look out for things that have been kind of tried and true. Like, okay, if a moving average might not make sense here, or it might be giving me false signals, what is a way of kind of examining this where it does make sense? I think when kind of thinking about a bear market, it makes sense to think about timing analysis. If you look at the kind of 2017 top to the bottom, it was 365 days, basically a year. 2014, it was 412 days. So if we kind of take an average of that, it should be about a little over a year if we continue to act in a similar fashion. So if we're looking at over a year, that means Bitcoin should bottom off around November, December. Now, is it guaranteed that Bitcoin will bottom off around November, December? No. But what I think November, December does mean is at that point, it starts to become less risky to be a bull in the market, given how Bitcoin has historically behaved. So does that make sense, or should I clarify that more?
Yeah, no, I think just a lot of times when people are looking at the charts, especially, they can see the lines, they can see the moves up and down, the green and red, but they don't quite know, other than indicators, they don't quite know how to see the patterns that are going to lead them to actually getting something out of it, on how to make a move or otherwise. again, I prefer to stake and have peace of mind rather than trading. But there's a lot, it's easier said than done. A lot of people definitely want to know what should I do? There's always like that in the back of your mind. What should I make a move or shouldn't I?
But if my thing is just to kick back a little bit here, like my whole thing with this is like, when do you know when to ever sell your hex? Sure, you can just kind of DCA your way out, ladder your way out. But for me, this is like a once in every 4 years kind of thing. So is that really trading if you're just making one sell every 4 years? Like for me, like this is useful because 4 years from now, when hex loses this same moving average or similar moving average, I'm going to sell. I'm going to take profits. And so, this is like a 4-year thing. So once in a 4-year trade, really a trade? I don't know.
That's a good,
technically it is a trade, but
well, good point too on the selling it. So I think a lot of people that I'm going to sell. I'll sell hex when it gets to $1, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then that's just a market sell, right? Yeah. No, it's like the ladder you talked about. Everyone says, okay, I want a ladder stake, but how would you do a ladder sell? Like, what would that? And are you able to tell something like that's happening on a massive level with a chart like this? So like, where do you need to how can you see these type of things?
Yeah. So the thing is, like, these periods here of consolidation, this is all selling, this is all weakness. But the hard part of a bull market is you always have these periods of run up and then sell off, run up and then sell off. And so the tricky part is knowing exactly which sell off is the final sell off, or is this just one more consolidation period before the next run up and the next consolidation period and then the next run up, next consolidation period. And so with TA, what you're trying to determine is this just a pit stop before the next leg up, or is this the actual top? And so for me, I'm interested in kind of maximizing my returns. And so I think it is useful to attempt to know when you could be selling near a top. And this strategy specifically, where you find a moving average that holds support at the beginning of the bull market, once you lose it by having several daily candles closing below it, I think while this is not a perfect strategy and doesn't guarantee that you're selling a top, what it does do is that if you sell if you kind of sold this candle or sold over here, what it does do is gives you a greater likelihood that you are selling near a cycle top. And so again, people may say, "Hey, that's unnecessary. Or, this is a great deal of risk." And again, like this kind of strategy, this is for someone who, like me, who's has a TA background, is actively willing to incur greater risk and incur the risk of attempting to time the market. This is not something I think that everyone should do. Like people are not just sitting in front of their screens trying to figure out what lines mean and reading the tea leaves. Like, most normal people ladder in when you've done well enough, ladder out. That's probably a useful strategy. But for someone like me who looks at the charts and follows crypto and has an understanding of TA, I think there's ways to understand when you are likelier than not near a cycle top, and this is one example of the ways.
Is that something? So if you think about, how long have you been doing TA? How many years?
3.
Okay. If you could, go back and say, okay, let's say you knew about hex, you could buy it, way before 8 cents, stuff like that, and just stake it for three years, let's say. Would you change it? Like, if you go back and buy it super cheap, under a penny, blah blah blah, stake it for 3 years versus, do the trades whenever, I'm not saying you're day trading, but I'm saying like doing the TA, making the trades you see necessary over the last 3 years. Which one would you do if you had the choice?
So absolutely. If I had known what hex was, when around hex first came out, I would have liquidated everything, gone into hex, and just staked it. Absolutely. My only thing is, like, again, I'm trying to, like, I've changed into just a long-term investor because, look, I'm not arguing for long-term or for trading here or anything. For me, it's just like I'm trying to think back to my TA background and what was useful, and for me, what was useful was understanding how certain tools can give you an understanding of what's more and less likely. And this specific strategy gives you an understanding of when the market can likely reach its cycle top, and that's useful because for it's great to buy an asset like Hex, but great, you bought a winning asset, but you should take profits. How do you know when to take profits? Again, you could just ladder your way out, and that's fine every like 2x, whatever it is. But for me, this is a helpful, useful strategy for kind of knowing roughly when a top might be. And so that's kind of how I that's kind of how I take what I think is useful from kind of my TA background and kind of incorporate it into my new strategy of kind of long-term investing, long-term holding. Like for me, this isn't something I'm going to implement until late 2025.
Implement
like for example, like when am I going to sell my Hex? Like for example, me, I don't plan on selling any Hex.
When would you start selling Hex based on what you see in TA?
Late 2025. Yeah. So again, given kind of cycle analysis, how we've moved historically, I think there is a decent argument to be made that the next cycle top is likely to be late 2025, third, fourth quarter of 2025, perhaps 2026. Again, I'm not saying this is a for sure thing, but given how we moved historically and lengthening cycles, I think there's a solid case that late 2025 is the next cycle top. Given that Hex kind of topped off a month or two after the rest of the market, kind of very late 2025, I think there's a solid chance that that's around when Hex tops off next. And so that is when I'll sell my Hex. Whenever I see Hex lose a moving average such as this come late 2025, I'm selling everything. And I'm going to move into stable coins, and I'm going to reaccumulate all my Hex all again after an 80% correction. After an 80% correction, so for example, let's say this is a 2025 chart, and we see this 3-day candle close below a moving average that's held as support all throughout the bull market. I will be selling all throughout here, and I'm going to simply, bust out measuring tool, wait for an 80% correction, and that's where I start buying once again. And if you sold around 33 cents and you're buying around, well below 10 cents, you're accumulating 3 to 4 times more Hex than you had originally, which will outperform any just staking. And again, there's added risk to this. There's tax implications. So I'm not suggesting this is a useful strategy for most people, but just for myself, because I think I can do it. Given this strategy, come 2026, if I can even pull this off roughly, I will be able to myself retire probably for the rest of my life come 2026, implementing the strategy. Where if I do this, I can double, triple, quadruple, quintuple my bag.
And how would you set up? How would you set up or just give an example? Someone who is going to do the same plan, 2025, you think that's the top. The next cycle, again, you want to take profits in Hex. How would you set up your staking? Like, would you still be staking for 1 year, 2 years out on ladders, or would you keep part of the liquid, all of the liquid? Like, how would you set that up?
So personally, myself, I currently have an average stake length of 10.5 years. So I do have my ladder in place. And recently, I've been accumulating a bunch of liquid Hex. I recently made a pretty big purchase under 5 cents in order to participate specifically in the trio pool. And so when the trio pool launches, I'm going to put all my liquid Hex into that. And when that pool expires sometime late 2025, that's going to be around the next Hex cycle top, likely, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I think there's a likelier than not chance. I think there's a way to understand these markets, and not just a random way. Like, there's a way to cut through the randomness and understand likelihoods, in my opinion. And so given that, I will sell all my principal plus interest come late 2025, even ignoring this moving average, just late 2025, third, fourth quarter, 2025. Bull markets don't go on forever, at least historically. These cryptocurrency markets, they exist in a fundamental nature of becoming euphoric, which is ultimately unsustainable, followed by a correction where we consolidate, and then rinse and repeat because of the Bitcoin halving. And I think that's likely to be this pump and dump we see for quite some more time. And so I think it is valuable and not impossible to roughly do this. At least for myself, again, not arguing other people do this. There's tax implications, great deal of risk. Staking and doing your ladder is fine for most people. Again, this is something I'm personally doing. So yeah, that trio pool, sell late 2025, just wait for an 80% correction, reaccumulate. I'll be able to, depending on how well I can time the market. I mean, Hex had a 95% dip. Presumably next time it'll be a 90, 85% dip. So if I just start buying, the next 80% dip, 85, 90, then 95, I'll, increase my bag by 5, 6, 7 times, depending on how well I can time the top and the bottom. And at that point, I can just stake month to month personally with just Hex alone, let alone, I'm into PulseChain, PulseX, so the liquid loans, other things as well, Power City, and just that, I'll be able to retire.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got a question from Hexalab. What happens if Trio matures a month after the top and the value of Hex drops 9% on maturity day?
Well, if it drops 90% on maturity day, then you're kind of screwed. This idea only works if you can roughly time the top and then roughly time the bottom. Like, I don't have to sell the next perfect top, but if I can somewhat time this within 20-30% and then time a bottom within 20-30%, that's all you need. You really just need to capture this middle range. That's all you kind of really need. And to be more specific, I will be using the strategy of finding a moving average that holds as support throughout the length of the bull cycle. Once we get daily closing below it, that's it, homie. So my hope is that pool expires before that happens. Even if it doesn't, and you're selling over here, even if you're able to double or triple your bag, that is extremely, extremely, extremely significant. Because at that point, there's the potential for quite a lot of people who, if they accumulate now, do something like this, and if they're managed to be successful, at that point, reaccumulating an 80% dip late 2026, likely, and staking month to month, many people will be able to supplement their income, if not retire. And I think I'll be able to do it. Because, for example, I personally think that Hex has a very solid chance of doing 1,000x from this cycle's all-time low. And I kind of get there by how Bitcoin moved from its first cycle to its second cycle. But even if Hex does something much more conservative, does a 100x, a 100x from this bottom would be basically a $3 Hex, and then past 90% correction would be a 30-cent Hex. So yeah, I think even at that point, me personally, staking Hex month to month at 30 cents, using the strategy, I think he'll be able to retire. Am I making sense? Please let me know if I'm making sense.
No, yeah, it's. Every time you say we'll be ready to retire, it makes a lot of sense. That's what people want. I mean, they want to know how this stuff is going to make them financially free, and that seems like one way to do it. The way you're doing it.
Yeah, man. And again, there's added risk in not timing the market. There's tax implications. So I'm not. Saying, again, I've said this a lot, but I'm not saying you need to do this, but what I am saying is that, to summarize here, I think there is a way using some simple TA to understand when it is likelier than not that we have reached a cycle top. And I think that's valuable because one can take that into account in their take profit strategy.
Absolutely. Another question from Hexlove. How can you calculate the number of T-shares you get investing in Trio? You know that one? Off the top of my head, I don't.
I don't think you can. My only thing is Trio, I think, is from what the developer said, is you're earning 15% a year. So 15% a year for 3 years, plus roughly timing cycle top, buying 80% correction, 4 or 5 timing your bag. And at that point, if you're staking month to month at the 30-cent Hex, I don't know how much Hex other people have, but for me, that'll be enough. to retire for the rest of my life.
Very cool, man.
And that's just Hex, bro. There's PulseX, there's PulseChain, there's everything.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Anything else you want to show on the chart?
I
was going to ask about Mount Gox dump incoming and what you thought about that. I don't know if you need the chart for that.
No, I don't need the chart for that. One last thing I would say too is that typically speaking, Ethereum in the altcoin market tops off roughly a month after Bitcoin did. Like we can see here, this Ethereum top was 10 May, and then over here for Bitcoin was 13 April. So roughly a month. Next time Bitcoin tops, we get daily candles, opening, closing below this moving average. Roughly a month later will be the Ethereum top, and probably when it makes sense to take profit on altcoins. Not financial advice.